What's up, guys? It is Saturday, May 19th, 2018. It's going to do Q&A tonight. It's actually 10, no, 10 after 9, so 9:10 p.m., which is late. It's like my bedtime. But this week has been absolutely crazy. I posted this thread like 4 days ago. I haven't had a chance to do it. I've been meaning to, but I've been sick the last 3 days. I'm just starting to feel normal today. Just been trying to focus on getting my normal work done and all that. So spending most of the day in the bathroom outside of that. But nonetheless, gonna get this done. And before I call it a night, so I know you guys are anxious, enjoying my favorite non-caloric beverage, Zevia. It's one of my favorite flavors. Actually, the orange flavor is pretty good. I really like the strawberry flavor is probably my favorite, but I can't find it anywhere other than like Whole Foods and places like that, which I never shop anyhow. So, unfortunately, so take what I can get. But yeah, I back at it, and we will get this rolling. Let's see. So topic was injuries, prevention, working around injuries, surgical recovery, so on and so forth. These are really good questions, so hopefully I can deliver. Okay. Let's see. First one, what injuries do you tell clients to push through? For example, the common cold. When do you know that you should call it a day instead of continuing to lift and do cardio, which would be counterproductive to recovery from the illness? Okay, so it sounds like this question is more so about sickness than injury, maybe. So there's a ton of injury questions on here. I'll actually go ahead and just address the illness thing because I think that that's also relevant to the topic and nobody asked about it. So with that, something like, it's going to depend on how you feel, obviously. Sometimes productivity would be so low because you feel so bad, and it will probably compromise recovery from the illness. So you probably shouldn't train. If you have the flu really bad, or like me, for example, I don't really know what I had, to be honest, but it was like stomach flu type thing, just constantly in the bathroom, fevers on and off, nauseous. It just felt really, really weak for like 3 days. Not sure if we picked it up when we were over in England or for the seminar, or if it was like something at the airport or what, but it just kicked my ass really fast. Something like that. I mean, honestly, I would train through most stuff, but it just wasn't going to happen. First day, no way. Luckily, I was scheduled off day anyhow. Second day, I planned on training. I actually tried to train and about shit my pants, actually. So I couldn't do it. Adjusted my nutrition and all that stuff, and was still able to get all my meals in, luckily. I know that's also a problem with that kind of flu-like illness. Third day, finally got back into it. Had I just trained through it, I mean, maybe, I'm sure I could have done something. Wouldn't have been productive. Definitely would have just probably hampered improvement from the illness even more, when really I needed the rest. So yeah, something like that, I wouldn't mess with it. Common cold, perhaps just train through it. If it's respiratory stuff, normally what I tell people is if it's mostly in the head, congestion, respiratory sinus and stuff, usually you can train through that. If it's really heavy in the chest, that's where you want to be a little bit more careful. So I mean, those are common things that people are going to deal with as far as like sickness goes. So that's kind of my rule of thumb with respiratory stuff. let's see. Thoughts on CBD balm and other types of NSAIDs for reducing or fighting off overuse injuries, pros and cons to both. Okay, so two different things really, because NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, uh, you so those obviously something you're not going to want to use chronically just because they will tear up your stomach. I really don't like using them much at all if possible. I think they're used extremely sparingly every once in a great while. It's probably not going to hurt anything, but I know people use them pretty liberally on a regular basis, and I'm just not a fan. It's the effects on the stomach lining are not friendly, especially with certain NSAIDs or other similar drugs that aren't necessarily NSAIDs, but they have similar effects. I just don't like them if they can be avoided. I know that they will help with pain, they will help with inflammation at times. If it's an issue of just holding you over for a little bit, okay, use the absolute minimum. Absolute minimum. CBD oil or balm or vape or pills or suppositories, whatever you want to use. So there are a whole host of benefits to CBD. There's actually, from what I understand, a U.S. patent on it, so you can actually go and look at what it's approved for, and it has some pretty cool. I guess there's some pretty cool stuff on the patent. I haven't actually seen it. I heard on it. It was a podcast I listened to about CBD, and they talked about the patent and stuff, because I don't think most people realize that. And it definitely has anti-inflammatory effects from the research that I've seen. Now, you have to use enough of it to get the anti-inflammatory effects. I do feel that CBD has some different effects at different dosages. So you kind of need to research, and there is some good literature online that kind of shows you like how you're going to dose it for different in different instances. So you would want to kind of figure that out. I can't really give you any exact recommendations. I've used the couple different forms of it, but not really for in a high dose or anything. Use it more for like parasympathetic nervous system activation, so the calming effect, which is a little bit lower dose than some of like the chronic pain relief effects. Downsides, there's not a lot. I mean, so one of the great things about CBD is that it has a lot of the positive effects of that marijuana would have without some of the negatives that THC has. Not that THC is like the worst thing in the world. It's not. I'm not like I don't really speak much on marijuana or like whether it should be legalized or anything. I really don't care. Never used it. Don't really care what people do. But I do know that there are some negatives to THC. Not a lot. Again, it's not going to kill anyone. But if you can use something like CBD, it's not psychoactive. So you're not going to get that. If you like to be high, well, you're not going to get high off CBD. But it does have a lot of the similar benefits with none of the downsides. So in theory, it's going to be something really good to use. So I hope none of the legal weed zealots try to beat my door down here. I'm not going to get in the middle of it. But yeah, so that's definitely an option. Then the other obvious thing would be we'll try to address the overuse issue. If it's something that has to do with improper, what's the word I'm looking for? Improper movement patterns. That's kind of wearing on a joint. Maybe you're not moving correctly through a movement, correct that. Or you have some kind of imbalance or whatever, correct those things. If it's an overuse thing where you just literally need to rest it, you might need to do that. If that's not an option, you have an event or something coming up, well, then you have these options temporarily. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a permanent fix for an overuse issue. So that's kind of my take on that. All right, so next one. Okay. Working around a unilateral injury. Left shoulder has issues with heavy, low reps. Should we do lightweight but to failure? Train the healthy side the same as the injured one, or is its capability level different? Using things like BPC 157, TB, thoughts and or prayers, and magic. Well, actually, I think a lot of injuries are probably unilateral, to be honest. I mean, if you think about joint injuries, other than maybe like your lower back, you know, like lumbar area or your neck or something, where there is two sides to your neck, but it's probably not, you know what I mean? I really wouldn't consider it like a unilateral injury. Whereas a shoulder injury, oftentimes it might just be one shoulder, or it might just be one elbow or one knee or something. So, I mean, I'd say a lot of injuries are unilateral. First and foremost, with anything like this is to try to figure out that to the best of your ability why it's happening. So you mentioned shoulder. So kind of retrace the steps of the movement pattern. There was somebody local. We went through some RPR therapy. I believe it's a proper abbreviation. And for any of you who don't know what that is, it actually part of the theory behind it is looking at how the body moves through movement sequence is what I should say. So let's say you're running. So what should move first? Should it be your hand moving forward first? Should it be your foot going forward first? Should it be your shoulder tilting? Should it be your hip moving? So it kind of shows like how parts are supposed to move in sequence. And when they get out of that sequence, it shows that how there are potential for injuries, or how there's under development of certain areas and muscular imbalances and potential overuse issues, so tightness in muscles and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting, and it makes so much sense when you think about a sequence. And then when we went over that and I went through a couple sessions, actually I just observe people all the time. Maybe it's a bad habit. People probably think I'm weird, but I am pretty weird. So, and I noticed like, wow, there is really something to this, because people move so differently. And I mean, everybody knows that. They just don't really think much of it. They just think, oh, your posture is different or whatever. But if you just look at like even how people walk, how do they lead? How do they lean? How do they move? It all goes back. There's a sequence to everything. So kind of look at, what movements are hurting you. How's the movement initiated? Can you pinpoint, where the pain's originating? If it's on one side of your body, it doesn't necessarily have to originate. This is where things get tricky. It doesn't necessarily have to originate in the shoulder. It might originate in the upper back. It might originate clear down in the hips. Could originate in the elbow. Could be anywhere. So obviously the type of pain makes a difference. Is it nerve pain? Is it like shooting through different areas? Is it joint pain? Maybe it's just wear and tear. Maybe the shoulder is a really complex joint. There's a lot of things that can potentially go wrong in there. So, maybe it is just an overuse thing. But first and foremost, like I said, I would probably try to correct anything you can. Easy thing you can do. I mean, you can stand in front of a mirror, put your feet together, close your eyes, relax, normal posture, open your eyes. Okay, is one shoulder higher than the other? Are you pitched forward on one side? You back on one side? You have do you have one palm that's supinated and one that's like pronated, or they neutral, or your hands way out in front of you. You look at all those things, and you might even just be able to work with a good ART therapist or anyone along those lines that can help with that sequencing and help move tight tissues around and so on, to get those things back in line. And then you're going to feel, okay, well, this doesn't hurt anymore because my joint isn't impinged and the shit's not rubbing together anymore. It's moving freely. Might be something as simple as that. And obviously some things you can do to help with the pain too, like the BPC and the TB. Yeah, those things will help. BPC seems to, at least anecdotally, from a lot of people's experience and on paper, have a little bit more of a localized effect, so it could be used in the area, whereas TB seems to be a little bit more systemic. TB used a little bit less often, maybe only a couple times a week, where BPC could be used up to 2 times a day. Depending on, could get expensive depending on the person's budget and all that good stuff. So yeah, those things I think they could be used. They could be used anyhow, even if you could address the actual issue. I don't think that they should be used to mask an issue, but I do think that they could be used in conjunction for sure. Not that they don't have to, but they could. And then activation, making sure that you can properly activate the area that is bothering you, activate the muscle in that area. That way, when you are moving weight, that that the muscle is moving the weight, that it's not a secondary mover involved in the movement that's taking the blunt of it, and that your joints just grind in a way that you're not really getting any good activation. So that's probably some main things that I would look at to get, to accomplish. Experienced lifters oftentimes blame the big 3 squat, bench, deadlift for the nagging issues they picked up throughout the years. Do you find that to be the case, and would you further down the line favor variations over those, i.e. hack squat, dumbbell bench, rack pulls? This is a hard issue, or a hard question to answer, because it's probably yes and no. Yeah, you could have just general wear and tear. Things that have some shearing force on the joint, even if you do them perfect, potentially, just because everyone's structurally and biomechanically aren't exactly the same. So certain movements are going to suit certain people a little bit better. That's why there's the adage, there's no movement that you have to do. And I stick to that for the most part. But with that said, I think that most people can adjust their movement patterns, their range of motion, their setup, their bar position, their hand position, whatever, foot position on movements to make it suit them and get the full benefit without the without the wear and tear. Is there any way to know what's going to happen to you in 20 years from now? Like, if you're going to have those issues? Well, probably not. You can just hope that you've done everything right and that it doesn't happen. So, hope for the best. But what I can say is, there's plenty of people that have done those movements. Even powerlifters that, yeah, they picked up some injuries over the years, but some that haven't picked up a lot, or not many, and they've been powerlifting competitively for a long time, like under heavy loads a lot. Do they have their form perfected? Maybe better than some of these other people, perhaps. I think there's a lot of factors that go into this. I think that you do need to biomechanically know how you move and what feels good. And if something, and like a lot of things don't feel good to these people, and they just keep doing it because they think they got a bench press or they got a deadlift or whatever, and they're stubborn and they're young. Like, that's what people say: when you're young, you're stubborn. So I mean, if you're having those issues, then don't do it. But I've worked with a couple guys, or at least been able to speak to them and see them go through a few things or show me a few things over the years, and I'm convinced for the most part that most people can adjust movement to suit them if they can get all of those setup things just right, like I said. But the issue is that you go online and you go in the groups and say, you gotta squat this to this depth, and you gotta use this foot placement, you have to, bench to your chest or whatever. And I think that's bullshit. Like, you can't listen to that necessarily if that doesn't feel right to you. So could that mean just do variations of things? Sure. If they feel good to you, that's fine. But if things don't, and there's a difference between something not feeling good, like you're just not good at it and it feels awkward, versus it hurting you. If you're not good at it and it feels awkward, then you probably need to do it. You probably have an imbalance somewhere that you're just weak in, some firing pattern or some movement sequence, and you need to fix that, because that's what's actually going to cause you problems later. Is you're never going to correct that, and you're going to have overuse issues, or you're going to have overpowerment in other muscle groups from doing only the movements that you're good at and feel good, and then you're going to end up with problems anyhow. So there could just be neglect issues there. You're just not balancing things out. So I really didn't answer the question, but I mean, at least I think I provoked some thoughts, because I don't really think there is a right answer to this. But I do think that you shouldn't necessarily avoid things that you aren't good at or are uncomfortable with. If they hurt you, try to figure out why first. Look at it, take a video of it, ask somebody that really knows what they're doing when it comes to movement sequence and how a joint moves and anatomy and biomechanics, and see if you can figure it out. If all else fails, don't do it. But last thing you want to do is create those imbalances and make it worse later on when you think you're making it better because you're not doing it. So that's kind of my takeaway here. Excuse me. So let's see. Okay. 2 more. Squats and deads if a person has spondy. I'm going to try to pronounce this. Spondylolisthesis. Right. Okay. So this is a spinal issue. I'm not giving you exact clinical diagnosis here, like the exact medical definition, but I do remember this specifically from, because I had actually originally was going to school to be work in the physical therapy field before I decided to pursue this field. So I did have some experience with some stuff like this. It's a spinal issue, I'm pretty sure it's when the discs, or the actual vertebrae are too mobile. And let me look, and let me give you guys an exact, I feel like I should give you guys an exact definition of it. Okay. Spinal disorder in which a bone vertebrae slips forward into the bone below. Okay, so I was close. I just want to make sure you guys had some actual legit science there. Now, with that said, I do remember actually talking about this because I had a client that had it, and this was a long time ago, but at the time I had no freaking clue. I was like, how is this person going to lift? And I talked to a few people about it. I trusted that. One of them was a physical therapist. Another one was a not even sure what exactly you would call them. Not a neuromuscular therapist, but movement specialist. I'm not sure what the exact term would be, but did some reading on forums and stuff from different experts. But what I've gathered, and what I did with this person, anyhow, from these trusted sources, is found that overuse of, or just over repetition of flexion and extension of the spine is really not good with this issue, but maintaining a neutral spine is good. So you got to remember, anything spinal, anything bone, I mean, there's bone in your spine, because obviously there's other things, there's tissue in between, but your joints, your bones, any structure like that doesn't move itself. The muscles around the area move it. So you do want those muscles to be strong. So to say not to never do these movements, I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I know some people will say that, but the people that I've learned from, and things that I read and what I did, was we did actually use those movements. The biggest focus was on maintaining a neutral spine, though, actually engaging the muscles, primarily like the erectors, making sure they had strong glutes and hips and posterior chain, clear up to the upper back, rhomboids, traps, teres major, teres minor, lats, all that stuff. And making sure those muscular structures were strong while maintaining a neutral spine. So, trying not to hyperextend too much on a deadlift or on a squat, but doing those things with a neutral spine where those muscles are engaged constantly and holding the structure in place and doing the blunt of the work. So it's actually strengthening the area, really, is what it is, because it's protecting that disorder, or whatever you want to call it. So I would say if you can do it properly and maintain that neutral spine, then do them, because they're probably going to benefit you. And the source, like I said, the sources that I trusted, they agreed. So that's my takeaway on it. If you can't do them wrong, too much flexion, too much extension, then you either need to not do them or correct the issue, definitely, because you probably will do more harm than good at that point. Okay, last one. Bring up lagging body parts after injury. I've had tendonitis in my left knee, which has affected quad development during my last bulk. I'm trying to bring up without irritating the tendons further. Figure out why you had tendonitis. Is it an overuse issue or an activation issue? It's in tendonitis a lot of the time. I know commonly lifters get in their elbows a lot. That's a really common one. Knees probably pretty far up there, maybe shoulders. But if your activation is really good, you're a lot less likely to get it, in my experience. Just because, like I said, the muscles are moving it. The joints aren't impinged. The joints aren't really taking the blunt of it, other than, they have load bearing down on it if you're underneath of a squat bar. But, the muscle it's moving it. It's moving it fluidly. So if you're having problems with the quad development, I would maybe think about something like traditional pre-exhausting them, where you are really firing up your quads and making sure they are fully activated. You have that neural connection, mind-muscle connection. Your nervous system is firing. It's sending the signals. That, hey, I'm going to go into this compound movement, and if I drop into this squat or I unrack this heavy leg press, that my quads are lit. They are going to immediately jump out, and they're going to work. It's not going to hurt my knees, whatever. So that's probably what I would, recommend first. And then obviously make sure the movement patterns are good. You don't have any imbalances in your stance. You don't have something, you don't have an overly tightness of some tissue, like your hamstring's overly tight, or your calf's overly tight, or you have poor ankle mobility, or your hips are off, or something, something that's causing your quads not to fire in the first place. Because you can do the activation work, but you're really just kind of like trying to force something to fire that's not really wanting to fire, because it's not being demanded to, because the sequencing's off, or there's an imbalance. So that's kind of going to the root. Make sure that you're moving properly and there's not something that's overly tight. Have it there, some kind of good soft tissue therapist go over your lower body really well. And if you can't, if you can't necessarily afford to have them do it all the time and maintenance that area, if they go over it, if you have someone that's good and they can go over your entire lower body, you're going to know what's tight. Like, you're going to know what area is affecting you, because one, you're going to feel it, and secondly, you're going to be going and they're going to be like, oh shit, that's tight. So you're going to know, and then you can do some manual stuff on your own to work on it, work on your range of motion, all that good stuff. So that would be kind of my advice if it's like a money issue, and then do the activation stuff before you train. You can even do stuff like BFR training if you're really having a hard time, blood flow restriction. That's traditionally used for injuries and stuff. It really reduces the load that you have to use. It will force tons of blood in there. You get a lot of the hypertrophy benefits with quite a bit less load on the joint. So lots of options there, lots of things you really need to look at. But I think that's it, guys. Just 31 minutes. But all right, guys, I hope you enjoy the Q&A. I will be posting another one probably a few more days. Get the next one up next week. We'll see you guys.